Have you ever sort of considered the grand tapestry of human destiny? You know, those moments of really profound mistakes, but also that constant, unwavering chance for, well, redemption.
Hmm.
What if the most pivotal junctures in spiritual history weren't just about human error, but were actually part of an ongoing, really intricate divine plan? A plan to set things right, to truly guide us back to some kind of ideal state.
That's a powerful thought.
Welcome, fellow knowledge explorers. Today we're taking a truly profound deep dive into a fascinating theological perspective, the providence of restoration as revealed by Reverend Sun Myung Moon. We're drawing from a pretty rich source that unpacks the foundational principles of this concept. We'll be looking at the biblical narratives of Adam, Noah, and Abraham through a really unique lens.
Yeah, and our mission today really is to understand this particular framework's interpretation of how God has worked through human history. It's about recognizing how divine actions seek to correct the failures of the past. We'll explore the intricate conditions and responsibilities placed upon key biblical figures, try to uncover the deeper reasons behind their successes and, well, their failures too.
Right.
And ultimately, see how these historical events are believed to shape humanity's path toward its ultimate restoration. It's a journey that, connects deeply to core questions of faith, free will, and divine purpose.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it gives you a bit of a shortcut to understanding this complex spiritual narrative.
Absolutely. So get ready to unpack some really significant concepts like indemnity conditions, the profound roles of symbolic and substantial offerings, and this recurring Cain and Abel dynamic throughout generations.
Mm-hmm.
We'll look at familiar stories with, well, fresh eyes, discovering the deep symbolic meanings embedded within them. We want to help you grasp this complex spiritual narrative quickly and thoroughly. And we'll make sure to define these terms clearly as we go, sort of guiding you through every step. So let's start at the very beginning of this providence. Our source tells us that even immediately after humanity's fall, God felt deeply responsible to save us. This spurred him to initiate what our text calls the providence to restore fallen people. And it began right there, didn't it, with Adam's family?
Exactly. And what's crucial to understand here is Adam's position after the fall. It's described as a midway position.
Midway.
Yeah, he found himself connected to both God and, tragically, to Satan. So to be purified, to fully return to God's side, he needed to fulfill specific spiritual tasks, what our source refers to as indemnity condition.
Indemnity conditions.
These are essentially specific actions needed to, you could say, pay back or rectify past spiritual failures.
hmm
In Adam's case, this meant restoring two core elements, the foundation of faith and the foundation of substance.
Okay, those terms sound absolutely crucial for understanding the whole journey. Can you maybe briefly explain what it means to restore the foundation of faith and the foundation of substance in this context?
Sure, yeah. Think of the foundation of faith as establishing a relationship of absolute trust and obedience towards God. It's about a central figure making a pure offering or fulfilling a mission purely through faith.
Okay, trust and obedience.
Right. And once that trust is established, then the foundation of substance comes into play. This is more about the relationships between individuals, specifically, like Cain and Abel in Adam's family, or later, other sets of brothers or groups. It's about them removing their fallen nature and coming together in unity under God's will.
Ah, I see. Purifying the relationships.
Exactly. Purifying the human heart and relationships. Both are essential steps for God to actually work through humanity according to this view.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, if Adam was the one who fell, you'd kind of expect him to be the central figure for faith restoration, right? Making a sacrificial offering.
You'd think so, yeah.
But the Bible, of course, shows Cain and Abel offering. So what does our source tell us about this unexpected shift? Why couldn't God's focus be directly on Adam at that point?
That's a great question, and it really gets to the heart of this whole providence of restoration idea. Our source explains that God couldn't work directly with Adam because, well, he effectively served two masters after the fall.
Two masters. Okay.
He had fallen and had this connection to Satan. So if God accepted an offering from Adam directly, Satan would have had a counterclaim, basically asserting his own dominion.
Ah, okay. A loophole for Satan.
Sort of, yeah. So to circumvent this, God symbolically divided Adam into good and evil representatives. Abel represented the good side, relating to God, while Cain represented the evil side, relating to Satan.
That's a fascinating interpretation.
Mm.
And our source connects this division back to Eve's two illicit love relationships, right?
Precisely. Cain is seen as representing the first sort of more unprincipled act with the archangel, while Abel represents the second act with Adam, which was, well, more forgivable in this context. And Satan, having claimed the universe through the fall, naturally had a stronger attachment to the elder son, Cain. Because of this, God chose to work with Abel, setting the stage for the foundation of faith through his offering.
So God accepted Abel's offering because he stood in that proper relationship and offered through faith. That successfully laid the foundation of faith. But what about Cain? The text says God didn't reject Cain's offering out of hatred. So what was Cain's crucial indemnity condition? What was he supposed to do?
Cain's main indemnity condition was to remove his fallen nature. This meant, essentially, taking the initiative to subjugate his own evil nature, and in doing so, reverse the archangel's original fall.
Reverse the fall. Wow.
Yeah, and the source details 4 specific characteristics of this fallen nature that Cain had to overcome. These are actually incredibly insightful for understanding, human behavior generally.
Tell us more about those characteristics. What were these 4 aspects Cain needed to address to shed that fallen nature?
Okay, so the first was about love. Cain needed to love Abel, genuinely, to take God's standpoint, rather than envying or resenting him. Like the archangel envied God's love for humanity.
Makes sense. No envy.
Second, respect. He needed to respect Abel as God's mediator, receiving God's love and guidance through him, not trying to seize Abel's position for himself.
Okay. Respect the mediator.
Third, submission. Cain was meant to submit to Abel, accepting his righteous dominion, instead of reversing that order like the archangel did with Adam and Eve.
Submit to the good.
Right, and finally, learning. He needed to be receptive to Abel's intentions, learning God's will from him rather than, multiplying evil thoughts and actions.
That's a really profound breakdown of that interaction. It moves way beyond just a simple story of sibling rivalry.
Absolutely.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, our source says this Cain and Abel dynamic isn't just about Adam's family, it's universal. How does this show up, in our own lives or in society today?
It truly is seen as universal. Internally, our innermost mind, that part of us that seeks goodness and truth, is seen as the Abel, while our body, or maybe our ego, often swayed by selfish desires, can be the Cain.
The internal struggle.
Exactly. That constant struggle within us mirrors that dynamic. Yeah. And then in our daily lives, we're often, consciously or not, seeking good leaders and righteous friends to act as able figures, people who guide us closer to our highest ideals and ultimately to God. Mm-hmm. And on a larger scale, our source suggests that societies, families, even nations often exhibit these roles, with one party ideally meant to guide the other towards a greater good.
But ultimately, of course, Cain murdered Abel. That completely disrupted the dynamic. What was the direct consequence of that act for God's plan, according to this view?
Well, this tragic act basically reenacted the fall. It repeated the archangel's original sin. Because of this, Adam's family failed to lay that essential foundation of substance.
So the second part failed.
Right. And as a result, God's providence came to naught in that generation. The whole plan to restore humanity had to essentially start over.
So what does this initial failure in Adam's family teach us then about God's plan and, human responsibility?
It reveals a really crucial principle, what the source calls conditional predestination.
Conditional predestination?
Yeah. God's will, his ultimate purpose, is absolutely predestined to be fulfilled. He will achieve it. However, the timing and the path through which that will is realized, and crucially, the success of individuals in fulfilling their part, that's entirely conditional on human responsibility.
So our choices really matter.
Immensely. This failure also highlights the continuous need for us to constantly seek for an able-type person and follow them. And unfortunately, it shows that human faithlessness leads to repeating these indemnity courses over and over.
Okay. So despite that failure with Adam, God's will remained absolutely predestined, unchangeable. So he chose Seth in Abel's place, and then eventually, after 10 generations, God called upon Noah's family to substitute for Adam's. Mm-hmm. Noah's time was considered the last days of that particular era, and he was meant to be the second ancestor of humanity, called to fulfill the will God had originally intended through Adam.
Right. Noah really became the central figure for restoring that first part, the foundation of faith. He endured, 120 years of ridicule, building that massive ark in absolute obedience to God's command.
Incredible patience.
Truly. And the ark itself was just packed with symbolic significance. for the Providence.
Right.
Its 3 decks symbolize the cosmos created through 3 stages. The 8 family members represented Adam's family, who were meant to be restored. And all the animals symbolize the entire natural world, also need to be reestablished under God's dominion.
And the 40-day flood judgment. It had a deep purpose, didn't it? Our source says it was to eliminate sinful humanity and raise up a family serving only one master, because God can't work with someone serving 2 masters.
Exactly.
And this number 40 keeps appearing in biblical stories. Why is that number so significant in this framework?
Yeah, the number 40 is incredibly significant here. It's not just some random duration. It represents restoring a numerical period that had been defiled or claimed by Satan. Our source explains that this number became characteristic of dispensations for the separation of Satan throughout biblical history.
Huh. Like when?
Well, think of Moses' 2 40-day fasts on Sinai.
Oh, right.
Or the Israelites' 40 years wandering in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Or even Jesus' 40-day fast and prayer in the desert. Each 40 period was seen as a time of purification, a necessary separation from a fallen state to establish God's side.
That gives a whole new layer of meaning to those stories. Now let's talk about the raven and the dove that Noah sent out from the ark. This part has some really interesting foreshadowing, according to our source. What did the raven signify?
Well, the raven's flight basically foreshadowed that Satan would still be looking for a condition, an opening, to invade Noah's family, just like he had done with Cain and Abel. It was sort of a warning sign that the struggle wasn't over yet.
Okay, so a symbol of Satan's continued presence. And the dove sent out 3 times. What deeper meaning did those flights hold?
The dove's 3 flights were really rich with prophecy, according to this interpretation. The first time, when it found nowhere to rest, it represented the first Adam, symbolizing God's ideal that was temporarily withdrawn because of Adam's fall.
Okay, first Adam.
The second flight, when it returned with an olive leaf, that symbolized Jesus, the second Adam. It foreshadowed that if the chosen people disbelieved, he would have nowhere to lay his head, he'd have to go to the cross. But the olive leaf offered hope for a future landing, the promise of the second advent.
Hope for the future.
Right. And the third time, the dove did not return. This symbolized Christ at the second advent, the third Adam, who, it's believed, will surely realize God's ideal, never again to be withdrawn. And Noah disembarking from the ark after the flood, that further foreshadowed the New Jerusalem, a new world under God's sovereignty.
Wow, that's intricate symbolism. So Noah successfully laid the foundation of faith by fulfilling the dispensation of the ark. But then, just like with Adam's family, it fell to his sons, Shem and Ham, to restore the foundation of substance.
Correct.
Ham, as the younger son, was in the position of Abel and needed to be one in heart with Noah. This brings us to that, well, somewhat strange story of Noah's nakedness, which Ham saw and felt ashamed of. This seems like such a minor detail maybe, but our source says it was a significant failure. Why was feeling shame at Noah's nakedness considered a sin in this specific context?
Yeah, this is a really crucial point, and maybe a bit counterintuitive. After the flood, Noah was essentially in the position of Adam before the fall, representing a state of primordial innocence.
Okay, like before the shame entered.
Exactly. God wanted to recover that original joyful heart through Noah's family, where Adam and Eve felt no shame in their nakedness. So when Ham, and then later his brothers too, felt shame and covered Noah, it was seen as tantamount to acknowledging that they had formed a shameful bond of kinship with Satan. By recognizing and reacting to the shame that only came into the world through the fall, their reaction inadvertently created a condition for Satan to enter their family, because it validated the fallen perspective. Our source really emphasizes this was a special case for Noah's family, a unique indemnity condition designed to restore that original unfallen innocence.
So Ham's act, that feeling of shame, meant he couldn't restore the position of Abel, and tragically, the foundation of substance was not laid again.
The providence in Noah's family, once again, ended in failure.
What are the lessons here then?
Well, it teaches us profound lessons about humility, obedience, and patience. Ham's self-centered perspective, his criticism of Noah's state, it frustrated God's long labors through Noah, and it demonstrated again that principle of conditional predestination. Despite Noah being this great father of faith, his family's failure meant the central role of leading the providence ultimately had to pass on to someone else, Abraham.
So the divine will, still absolutely predestined, still unwavering, called Abraham to start yet another new chapter. He was tasked with restoring the foundation for the Messiah that Noah's family couldn't complete.
Yes, and Abraham was tasked with restoring through indemnity all the conditions lost by Noah. This was a massive undertaking.
It sounds like it.
It included symbolically restoring the 10 generations from Adam to Noah and the 40-day judgment, which our source connects to that 400-year period from Noah to Abraham. He also had to restore the position of the father of faith, like Noah, and also fulfill Ham's failed role as the beloved Abel figure.
And there's something about him being the firstborn of an idolater.
Right. It's noted that God specifically claimed Abraham, who was the firstborn son of Terah, an idolater, as a way to offset Satan's claim on firstborns, which stemmed back to Cain.
Abraham's journey itself, being commanded to leave Haran for Canaan and everything that happened after, it truly became a kind of model course, didn't it?
Absolutely. It foreshadowed the paths of Jacob, Moses, even Jesus, symbolically taking humanity out of Satan's world, represented by Haran or Egypt, and bringing them back toward God's world, represented by Canaan. He was laying the blueprint for restoration.
Okay, so for his big symbolic offering, God commanded Abraham to offer 5 specific animals: a heifer, a she-goat, a ram, a turtle dove, and a pigeon. These were the objects for this crucial symbolic offering.
Correct, the physical elements.
And before he could even make that offering, Abraham had to demonstrate what our source calls right faith. This included that trip to Egypt, where Sarah posed as his sister. What was the significance of that act in this framework? Why pretend she's his sister?
That trip to Egypt and the whole Sarah as sister episode symbolized the restoration of Adam's family from Satan's dominion. It seems mirroring how the archangel had improperly taken Eve when Adam and Eve were still spiritually in a brother and sister relationship before the fall. It was an indemnity condition Abraham had to fulfill to reclaim that pure, original familial order before God.
Wow, okay. And with the offerings themselves, what did the different animals symbolize?
Well, the 3 main types of sacrifices, the dove, the ram, and the heifer, represented the cosmos, and also the 3 stages of the growing period: formation, dove, growth, ram, and completion.
Formation, growth, completion.
Right. And by placing them all on one altar, it symbolized restoring all the accumulated indemnity conditions from Adam and Noah all at once, horizontally in one generation. The symbolism was huge. It revealed God's profound will to fulfill the entire providence of restoration, finally, through Abraham.
But then something went wrong. A really critical error occurred. Our source explains that Abraham cut the larger animals in 2 as required, but did not cut the birds in 2. This led to birds of prey coming down and defiling the sacrifices, and this dreadful great darkness falling upon him. Why was not dividing the birds so significant? What did that specific failure represent?
Yeah, this was a pivotal mistake, with just profound consequences. By not dividing the birds, it meant several crucial things, according to this source. First, Abraham failed to symbolically divide good from evil, Abel from Cain, effectively repeating the failure to restore the situation in Adam's family.
Repeating the pattern?
Exactly. Second, it echoed Noah's failure, where good and evil remained undivided despite the flood's supposed cleansing. Third, there was no symbolic condition established to separate a realm of God's good sovereignty from the universe, still largely under Satan's influence.
Okay.
And fourth, perhaps most critically, the offerings themselves were not sanctified because the blood of death wasn't drained out from the undivided birds. This allowed Satan to lay claim to them, especially the dove representing the formation stage, and consequently the ram and heifer as well.
That's a huge weight of symbolic failure in just one seemingly small action.
Well,
What were the tangible consequences of this mistake?
the direct result, according to this teaching, was that Abraham's descendants had to suffer 400 years of oppression and slavery in Egypt.
The 400 years.
Yes. This became an indemnity period, specifically meant to restore what was lost through Abraham's mistake and to lay the foundation for Moses' later mission. This one mistake significantly prolonged the providence, extending it now through 3 generations: Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
So God then commanded Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, his only son. After such a huge setback with the first offering, why a second chance? And why such a drastic, almost unthinkable command?
It's a shocking command, absolutely. Our source provides 3 key reasons for this second chance. First, the number 3 represents completion. Yeah. So the third dispensation to Abraham's had to succeed somehow for the overall providence to move forward.
Okay, the number 3 again.
Second, God could then work to take back both Abraham and Isaac over 2 generations, effectively mirroring and finally overcoming Satan's initial attack on Adam and Cain. And third, crucially, Abraham now stood on the accumulated merit of the successes of Abel and Noah, giving him a stronger spiritual foundation for this ultimate test.
And before the Isaac offering, Abraham even repeated that Sarah as sister indemnity condition, this time with Abimelech. So, further purifying the family line.
Right.
His absolute obedience to God's command to sacrifice Isaac, his beloved only son, it meant he had already symbolically killed himself, that is, his old Satan-defiled self. When God intervened and provided the ram, Isaac, now symbolically severed from Satan's ties, stood firmly on God's side.
Yes.
And that 3-day period Abraham took to reach Mount Moriah, that became another profound pattern, didn't it, for the separation of Satan in new dispensations. We see it again with Jacob, Moses, and even Jesus in the tomb for 3 days.
Yes, exactly. So Isaac, now united with Abraham in this unwavering fidelity, inherited the mission. He made his own symbolic offering by participating willingly in the offering of the ram that substituted for him. He even carried the wood for the sacrifice, remember. This act successfully restored the foundation of faith, finally.
Foundation of faith restored. Okay, so with that established, Isaac's sons, Esau in the Cain position and Jacob in the Abel position, then had to lay the foundation of substance. Jacob had to fulfill those indemnity conditions to restore the position of Abel, similar to what was originally required of Cain towards Abel.
And this is where it gets truly amazing, because Jacob systematically restored that old position through a series of really significant victories. First, remember how he cleverly obtained Esau's birthright for just a bowl of pottage?
Yeah.
That demonstrated the immense spiritual value of the birthright and symbolically restored the position of the eldest son, which Satan had claimed through Cain.
Okay, restoring the birthright.
Second, he endured those 21 hard years with Laban in Haran, what our source calls the satanic world, and he triumphed, gaining family and wealth. This effectively restored the birthright indemnity on a family level.
Right, the struggle with Laban.
And third, on his way back to Canaan, he wrestled with an angel all night at the ford of Jabbok. He won that struggle, restoring dominion over the angel in a very real, physical, and spiritual encounter.
The wrestling. Incredible. And finally, after Jacob's long return from Haran, that moment when Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. For the first time in the Providence, this act successfully fulfilled the indemnity condition to remove the fallen nature. The foundation of substance was laid successfully. This is a huge turning point, isn't it?
It is absolutely monumental. So what does this ultimately mean? The foundation for the Messiah was finally established, but only on the family level.
Only family level. Why not Messiah right then?
Because, as the source explains, satanic nations still existed and dominated the world. Abraham's family, even Jacob's growing clan, was still relatively small and could easily be overwhelmed. A broader national foundation was needed before the Messiah could be securely received.
Ah, okay. So Jacob's family then began that 400-year course of indemnity in Egypt, the same period foretold to Abraham, specifically setting the stage for a nation to eventually receive the Messiah.
Exactly. Jacob, as the central figure, effectively shouldered Abraham's sin, and his descendants paid the indemnity. And his son Joseph became the crucial Abel figure in Egypt, preparing the way for his brothers and father to enter that land and begin forming that nation.
It's interesting how the source says God regarded Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob almost as the same person regarding his will.
Yes, it demonstrates God's sheer determination to fulfill the providence through that lineage. Jacob's ultimate triumph, earning him the new name Israel, signified that he had set the pattern, laid the groundwork for how to bring Satan to submission on a national level. It was a course that Moses and later Jesus would follow.
So Abraham's whole course really reinforced those crucial lessons, conditional predestination, both for God's overall will and for individuals. And it showed us that human failure inevitably delays God's will, right? And when that happens, it requires greater indemnity conditions.
Precisely. For Abraham, the initial failure with the animal sacrifices meant the indemnity condition escalated dramatically to the offering of Isaac.
And this raises a really profound question for us today, doesn't it? You mentioned Abraham's act of cutting the sacrifices in two.
Yes. It teaches us that we, too, must divide our own self as an offering to separate good from evil. We need to be constantly purifying ourselves according to God's will, making that distinction within ourselves.
Why is that so important for us personally?
Because if we neglect to do this, if we don't make that conscious effort to separate the good from the bad inclinations within us, we inadvertently create a condition, an opening for negative forces, for what this text calls Satan, to potentially invade our own lives, our thoughts, our relationships.
Wow, what an incredible journey we've taken today, really. From Adam's initial failure through Noah's challenges and finally to Abraham's incredibly arduous path culminating in Jacob's triumph. We've explored a truly profound theological framework for understanding God's persistent, long-suffering efforts to restore humanity. It's a story of repeated attempts, conditional successes, and just deep, often surprising symbolic meaning embedded in these familiar biblical
It
narratives.
really is.
Yeah.
And our deep dive into this providence of restoration highlights the profound idea that our individual choices, our relationships with others, and our willingness to embrace that Cain and Abel dynamic for good, it can have far-reaching spiritual implications.
Yeah.
It challenges each of us, doesn't it, to reflect on our own fallen nature and how we can constantly strive to divide good from evil within ourselves. And also to recognize and honor the able figures, those guides, mentors, maybe even just our own inner conscience in our lives.
So, as you, our listener, reflect on this journey we've taken, maybe consider this. If these patterns of restoration and indemnity have repeated throughout history with such specific conditions, what indemnity condition, big or small, might be awaiting fulfillment in your own life right now? Or maybe even in the broader human story to bring us closer to that ultimate ideal?
Mm.
What able figure are you called to follow, or perhaps even more challenging, to embody yourself?